Before I really begin the sermon, I've got to tell you a story that you've probably heard many times around Thanksgiving. But you must remember this story. Do you remember the story about the early pilgrims coming to this country, and that the Indians, according to this story, myth, legend, whatever, gave them some corn? And rather, didn't give them much corn, but rather than planting the corn, they ate the corn. You remember that story? Wasn't a good deal, was it? Sometimes it's important to plant a seed and to see the results of that investment of seed. Remember that story. Dr. King, meet President Obama. Many of us had tears in our eyes on election night. Some had tears of sadness and disappointment that Obama won. Others, both Democrats and Republicans, had tears that reflected awareness of the historical significance of the moment. Though Barack Obama is as white as he is black biologically, his primary social identity is that of African American. And we as a nation took pause to realize and celebrate what we had done and how far we have come. How far we have come. How many of you ever attended a segregated school? How many ever attended segregated school? Several. How many of you ever went to a segregated, we won't raise our hands any longer. How many of you ever attended a segregated picture show? How many of you ever ate at a white-only restaurant, or slept in a white-only motel, or drank from a water fountain marked white-only or colored? If you are older than 60, you may remember seeing widely publicized pictures of a lynching in Indiana. Growing up as I did in Alabama, I remember Governor George Wallace standing in the door of the University of Alabama declaring that it would never be integrated. One of the saddest, most disappointing memories of my teenage religious experience was when my Southern Baptist Church voted to post deacons at the door to turn away blacks. And almost all of you of a certain age will remember watching on your television sets as Bull Connor, Commissioner of Public Safety in Birmingham, unleashed police dogs, fire hoses, and electric cattle prods on peaceful demonstrators. You may also remember seeing on TV the bloody beatings on the bridge in Selma. You will recall the murders in Mississippi, including at least one Unitarian Universalist. You will remember the March on Washington in August of '63 and Dr. King's famous speech, "I Have a Dream." Perhaps some of you were there and heard Dr. King say, "I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character." Then you will recall that in less than a month, the Klan bombed the 16th Street Baptist Church in Birmingham, and 4 little black girls were killed. This was the event that galvanized the civil rights movement and awakened the conscience of the nation. The next year, on July 2nd, President Johnson signed the Civil Rights Act of 1964. He signed the legislation knowing that it would cost the Democrats the South for 50 years. Less than 4 years later, Dr. Martin Luther King was assassinated in Memphis. The evening before his death, he had delivered a speech to and for striking sanitation workers. Toward the end of that speech, he made reference to an almost successful attempt to kill him several years before. Then he went on to mention the increased threats he had been receiving. He closed the last speech of his life with these words. And some began to say the threats, or talk about the threats that were out. What would happen to me from some of our sick white brothers? Well, I don't know what will happen now. We've got some difficult days ahead. But it really doesn't matter with me now, because I've been to the mountaintop, and I don't mind. Like anybody, I would like to live a long life. Longevity has its place. But I'm not concerned about that now. I just want to do God's will. And He's allowed me to go up to the mountain. And I've looked over. And I've seen the promised land. I may not get there with you. But I want you to know tonight that we as a people will get to the promised land. And so I'm happy tonight. I'm not worried about anything. I'm not fearing any man. Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord. Those were his last public words. Some believe that the election of Barack Obama fulfills Dr. King's dream, that the content of one's character be more important than the color of one's skin. But according to Earl Hutchinson, author of How Obama Won, here are some sobering reminders. Obama got 96% of the black vote, which made a crucial difference in must-win states like Ohio and Pennsylvania. According to Hutchinson, Obama's appeal to white, young, college-educated business and professionals was overstated. McCain got 53% of their vote. McCain trounced Obama among North and South rural and blue-collar whites. Obama won only 44 of 400 counties that comprise the Appalachian Belt stretching from New York to Mississippi. Overall, Obama got less than a third of the Southern white vote. The reports that Obama has received more taunts and physical threats than any other president-elect is another troubling indication that an untold number of Americans still can't stomach the thought that an African American will be in the White House. One of the things we need to remember about Dr. King's I Have a Dream speech is that he spoke about the legacy of segregation, bigotry, and discrimination that trapped thousands of blacks in poverty. Has progress been made? For those of us who remember the 50s and 60s, yes. Progress has been made. But there is still work to be done.